Hi all, my name is Ian and it gives me great pleasure to bring you my new YouTube channel entitled Good Moves. And I was, I got the name for the channel from the American chess legend Bobby Fischer, who many of you will have heard of, I'm sure, even if you're not entirely familiar with the game of chess itself. And Bobby Fischer famously once said, "I don't believe in psychology, I believe in good moves." Um, so, a little bit about my chess background. I've been playing and studying now for the best part of 30 years. I've not quite made it to the exalted heights of Grandmaster, but if I have a claim to fame, as it were, I did scoop a couple of trophies back in 2011 at Morley College Chess Club, which is based near Westminster. And I played for them for on and off for a number of years. And I also, for a little while, played for Lewisham, which is a bit closer to where I live in Brockley in southeast London. I've also been teaching for since about 2007, 2008. So let's say 12 years. I've taught children as young as 7. And for the last few years, I've mostly been teaching adults, most notably at some local community hubs and mental health charities. So that's me, not quite in a nutshell, but anyway. So just to say a little bit about my intentions with the channel. This is aimed principally at those of you who are a little familiar with the game. I'm proceeding on the assumption that you at least know how all the pieces move, and don't worry if you're not entirely familiar with all of the rules of the game, and in particular the so-called 3 special moves, and those are castling, pawn promotion, and en passant. And en passant is French for in passing. And don't worry too much about those now because I will make videos later to make all this clearer. So these videos are intended for beginners. I'll probably make some videos aimed at the more, let's say, intermediate player. And so we have a bit of variety. But I'm going to start off today by looking at what we might actually call disaster on the f2 or f7 square. And again, in case you're not familiar with chess notation, f2 and f7 refer to 2 specific squares on the chessboard. And chess notation is essentially the language we use to record and annotate games. So each square on the 64 square chessboard is represented by a letter and then a number. So there are 8 columns or vertical lines going up and down, and those we refer to as files or A to H. So we have the A file, the B file, the C file, so on and so forth. And then there are 8 ranks, which refer to the horizontal lines that go from left to right up across the board. And so we could say A1, A2, A3, B1, B2, B3, respectively. And the software I will be using for these videos incorporates chess notation, so you'll be able to hopefully learn more of this as we proceed. And it's quite self-explanatory. So, and because the game of chess is about the kings, and because you can lose a game or indeed win a game very quickly if you're not paying close attention to weaknesses and vulnerabilities where your king's concerned. We will begin here. So I'm going to bring up my chessboard on the screen now, and here it is. And there's and there's me in the right-hand corner. I'm just going to go enlarge myself just a fraction. Okay, so you may be familiar with the famous Scholar's Mate, which is usually one of the first lessons you will be introduced to by most chess tutors. And also, if you pick up a primer, a chess book, which is aimed at those just starting out, you'll typically be introduced to the following sequence. Now, just before I begin, it's worth noting that chess is largely about what we call pattern recognition. And so there are, let's say, recurring motifs, recurring patterns. So you will see, these patterns and these sequences occurring time and again. But chess is not simply a case of, or a test of, what you can remember, although memory does play an important part. And certainly if you have a good memory there and you have an enthusiasm and interest for chess, then certainly that will benefit you. So let's look at the famous Scholar's Mate, which goes like this. So both players have moved their e-pawn. So obviously this is the e-file. Our kings always stand on the e-file at the beginning of the game. And of course, chess is a turn-based game. So I make a move, you make a move. So now with this move, bishop to c4, this bishop is now on this a2 g8 diagonal, and the bishop is taking direct aim at this f7 pawn. Now, white doesn't necessarily want to capture that immediately and lose that bishop. So let's say now black brings out this knight to c6. And let's say white now plays queen h5. Now, I'm not suggesting that if you're playing white, you should play this way. And that's because certainly if you're playing against even someone, not necessarily a very experienced player like a master, but even if you're playing against somebody who knows this sequence, for example, it won't work. But if, on the other hand, you're playing, someone completely new to the game, you've just taught them the moves and the rules, and they've never seen this sequence before, then there's every possibility that you could catch them unawares and beat them in very short order. Now, a slight digression, if you've not yet seen the Queen's Gambit, the fantastic series on Netflix, which is based on this wonderful book, The Queen's Gambit by Walter Tevis. Well, I highly recommend that. Absolutely brilliant. If you are familiar with the story, then you'll know that the central character in the story, Beth Harmon, at the beginning of the story, she meets in the orphanage. She meets the janitor, Mr. Shybel, who finally, after some persuasion by Beth, agrees to let her play. And he beats her using this very sequence of moves. Beth, of course, wasn't to be discouraged. Anyway, I digress. So let's imagine here that Black brings out this knight to f6, thinking, well, what are you going to do now because I'm attacking your queen on h5? Well, White wins very simply here. Notice that with the queen having moved to h5, she, in combination with this bishop on c4, have a coordinated attack on this f7 pawn. I should point out as well, since this is our theme, that at the start of every game, the f7 pawn, if you're playing with Black, and the f2 pawn, if you're playing with White, are the most vulnerable points in the position. And the reason is that if you look, those pawns are only defended once by the respective kings. And so here, because this pawn on f7 is only protected once by the Black king, but attacked twice by two white pieces, this means that White can simply play queen takes f7 and checkmate Black. So, of course, the queen can't be captured because she's protected by that bishop on c4. Okay. Now, so that's the famous Scholar's Mate. And I certainly suggest you familiarise yourself with that if you haven't done so already. And what I'm going to show you now, because this is also something you should know. So if I just reset the board, there is also what's known as fool's mates. Yep, you heard right. Fool as in F-O-O-L. And it's okay to be a fool just so long as you're not a great fool. So, well, fool's mates is actually, believe it or not, an even quicker way to lose or win than scholar's mates. So, the fool's mate goes like this. It's actually White who gets mated this time. So let's imagine that White began a game with this move, pushing the pawn to f3. And let's say Black plays e5. Now, White hasn't lost on the spots here, but f3 is not generally to be recommended, at least if you're new to the game. But let's say, for example, that White now played this pawn on g2 up to g4. Well, what's happened is White has left his king dangerously exposed on this h4 e1 diagonal, and Black can win very simply with queen d8 to h4, and that is checkmate. So now, I'll say, without digressing too much, there are typically three ways to get out of check. One is to move the king to a safe square. Here, that's not possible. There's literally nowhere for the king to go. Another way to get out of check is to capture the attacking piece, the piece that's given check. In this case, that's not possible because no white pieces or pawns are able to capture the black queen. And the other way to get out of check is to block the check. And so here, if white were able to place one of his pieces, I mean, ideally he would like it if this bishop on c1, for example, were on the e3 square, because then he could drop the bishop back from e3 to f2. And that would not only block the check and get out of check, but that would also be attacking the black queen and she would be forced to beat retreats. So, that is, excuse me, just two examples of, I think, what we can appropriately call disaster on the f7 and, in white's case, as we just saw, the f2 squares. So this is a very brief introduction from me, and I will bring you more videos in due course. Thanks ever so much for watching. I wish you a very happy and prosperous new year. Bye.